Wadhurst Ghost Stories is a 2021 collection by me, James Ward. This is one of a series of videos in which I attempt to explain, partly for my own longer-term benefit, what inspired my work, what it's about, and what it was meant to achieve. I should probably begin by pointing out that Wadhurst is a real-life village in England's East Sussex. It goes back to at least Anglo-Saxon times, but apart from 3 episodes, it's had a fairly unremarkable history. In 1863, it played host to the last major bare-knuckle prize fight in England. In 1956, an RAF fighter plane crashed into the village centre. And in 2023, the Sunday Times named it the UK's best place to live. None of those things is mentioned in the stories. I'll explain why I set them all in a single location in a moment. Obviously, there are lots of ghost story collections, and it's pointless putting pen to paper unless you're prepared to try for something different. On the other hand, you don't want to be too different. You have to respect the conventions whilst trying to turn them to new effect. It helps to have something to aim for, even if you've little chance of emulating it. In my case, that something was the ghost stories of M.R. James. Their strengths are firstly a strong sense of place, in his case rural East Anglia. Secondly, good characterisation. These are not only short stories, but we care about what happens to the people who inhabit them. Thirdly, he stops just short of horror. In my view, the horror story and the ghost story are logically distinct categories, although I admit they often overlap in practice. I was also partly inspired by Andrew Martin's Radio 3 series, The Further Realm, still available on iPlayer. Martin claims rightly, I think, that there are no really good ghost novels. The best are all concise. Also, a satisfying ghost story is told. It must be non-committal. It should begin, a certain person some time ago told me the following tale. Make of it what you will. Or, this once seemed to happen to me, you be the judge. For that reason, ghost stories need a first-person indirect point of view, and the past tense. I thought it would be wise to retain James's use of a strong locale, but that I could go one better. Rather than disguise real places under invented names as James did, I would use a single real place under its real name, and include as much genuine historical and geographical detail as was consistent with good taste and preserving everyone's right to privacy. Some of these stories occur in the present, others in the relatively recent past, but they all happen in Wadhurst. I was helped by Savage and Mason's 1988 History of the Village and the locally produced Victorian Wadhurst. Many of the sites I describe no longer exist. The Queen's Head, for example, was once the village's main pub, but was destroyed in that plane crash. In any case, there's more history in this book than I can now remember putting in. The question I began with was, if a further realm really existed, how could it conceivably be related to this one, and what would be our chances of understanding it? To help answer that, I drew on Western esotericism, and since I see that partly as an offshoot of Christianity, conventional religion also plays a respectful part in here. Beyond that, I used the work of the German thinker Rudolf Otto. For Otto, the numinous is both terrifying and fascinating at the same time. Above all, it's profoundly opaque. It resists our understanding. As for the characters, it's probably best to present those in terms of the actual stories, of which there are just 7. The first, The Ancient Serpent, concerns a young couple living in Oxford. She's a hard-working junior lecturer, and one day, as so often happens in these sorts of stories, she discovers an old manuscript. It mentions Wadhurst, and she insists they go there immediately. She eventually reveals she knows a lot more than she's so far let on, and that there are certain mysterious things she has to do. The titular serpent comes from the biblical book of Genesis, and the story explores the ways in which it might actually defy present-day comprehension. The second story takes us back to Wadhurst in the years just after the Second World War. At a prestigious engagement party in Tunbridge Wells, a long-lost uncle turns up with a bizarre gift for the bride-to-be. Yes, it's the deed to a buried oil field at a precise location in the deep countryside surrounding the village. Everyone enjoys a weary chuckle. Uncle Ian is known to be dubious. This is rural England, for pity's sake, not Texas. But the couple decide they might as well investigate. And then, of course, they wish they hadn't. Story number 3 probably owes more to H.P. Lovecraft than M.R. James. A middle-aged couple buy a newly built mansion at a knockdown price and turn it into a hotel called the Wheeled in Excelsior. But guests are slow in coming. They then have the bright idea of hiring a historian to fabricate a few uncanny tales and organise a Christmas ghost walk on the back of them. Only they don't get ghosts, they get something else. The 4th story, the Wadhurst Obelisk, comes closest to what I was aiming for with this collection. A middle-aged journalist with a passion for antiques is alerted by an insider friend in the auction business to the upcoming sale of an 18th century oil painting called the Wadhurst Obelisk. She's sceptical, but she puts in a bid for politeness' sake, and she's mightily relieved when it doesn't win. After which, things take a turn for the weird. But hopefully that's true of all these stories. The next takes place in the 1930s in the long shadow of the First World War, and against the first ominous rumblings of the Second. It concerns a couple of Freudian psychoanalysts and one of their patients, a highly disturbed young man with recurring dreams of the disappearance of his best friend. But the dreams eventually test modern psychology to breaking point. The penultimate story, Dr. Jenkinson's Machine, takes place in 1889 and required the most historical research. It tells of the arrival of a travelling showman to the village. Dr. Elias Jenkinson has booked the showroom of the Queen's Head for a demonstration of real magic using a mysterious machine he's just invented. In the event, it's a sellout, with people arriving from miles around by train. In between Dr. Jenkinson's first appearance and the night of the show, however, increasingly strange things have been happening. The final story is called Roddy Sarwin and takes place in the very near future. It's about a mysterious man dressed in a harlequin costume who appears in the village every autumn, who never speaks, who then disappears, and who seems to inhabit the border where good meets evil, but perhaps with a slight bias towards the latter. Is devotedly followed by an apocalyptic cult of New Age musicians. I won't say any more. This is a story that best speaks for itself, if it does so at all. Anyway, that's Wadhurst Ghost Stories, and that's enough from me. If you've got this far, thank you for watching.